Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And back with me is Frank with Rockets Chop Shop. Check out the Rockets Chop Shop YouTube channel for all the great content over there. And it's always great to see you, Frank. Mainly, I wanted to hit on our top 3 offseason targets for the Rockets, but you and I haven't spoken since we found out about Rafael Stone's contract extension. Was that the right move?
I would say it's the no-brainer. Whether it's right or wrong, it's irrelevant. I think the way I view it, I don't think Rafael Stone has done anything that warrants him being fired, because the expectations for the past few years are for the team to be bad, right? They were tanking, so you can't really make a judgment either way. And even some of the mishaps, a lot of the effects of some of the things that he's done, you're not going to really see the outcome for a couple more years. There's not enough evidence for him to lose his job, and to me, it's just like filing your taxes. You know, if you have a GM that's not doing anything that's egregious, then you just extend them. Now, where I do stand on this, I think there's 2 things I would consider. Number one, him getting an extension does not mean that he isn't still being, judged for his actions. As you guys know, with front office, non-basketball players, there's no cap space. So a guy could get fired pretty much at any time during his tenure as a general manager or front office executive. And number 2, that I think it's even more important, is that it's not Rafael Stone and Stephen Silas that we're expecting to change his team. It's Rafael Stone and Coach Udoka. And I think that makes a big difference, because I feel like, this is just my feeling from when Stephen Silas was here, I think Stone, all the reports of him being at practice, I feel like he saw things that were wrong and he was overextending his skill set to try to correct them. And I think that's what led to a lot of the bad things that came out. Now you have a guy in Udoka who's more commanding presence. He's a leader and is organizing everything as it relates to basketball, where Stone can focus on his actual job, which is signing guys, getting the right targets that Coach Udoka wants, and getting these contracts negotiated. So in that aspect, I don't see a problem with it. And I'm just excited to see what they actually do this summer.
Did you hear anything that caught your ear in Stone and Udoka's end of season press conference? Maybe you thought, well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think the change in tone from kind of being more aggressive at the start of the year when they talked about the future of the team trying to improve, it seemed like the kind of when they asked him about, what do you think you need to get this summer to improve the team? And he said he loves our team and he would like to bring the team back. That is a bit interesting because I don't think this same team, even if they had the same season next year with everybody healthy, the West is so dynamic. And as you know, Robert, as a longtime NBA fan, no 2 seasons are the same. This whole thing could flip on its head with the drop of a dime. So I do think that saying you're going to bring your team back, and both him and Udoka took that approach, I agree largely. I still think that they need to be aggressive about making moves on the peripherals to improve the roster. And I think that's what we're going to discuss here in a second. But I did notice the kind of the tone of, we're good and we're going to kind of stick to our guns. I agree with that on 90% of the roster, especially our young core. But I feel they could improve a lot of the bench and improve some of those roster spots that are given to guys that don't play at all, like Boban. So I just feel like if you want to make a deep run in this West, you're going to need at least 11 or 12 guys when you factor in injuries and everything that can actually be consistent NBA players.
The one thing I did like about him saying that is, I definitely feel like that means we're not going to see, them trading a couple of the young core pieces,
right,
as a panic move for some, overpriced old veteran that, is not going to be able to do much in a couple of years when some of these other young guys, the other guys you hope are your core, are ready to do something.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And I think that's really the thing. And I'm wondering whether Jalen's March had any impact on that change of philosophy for them, because regardless of what people think about the reports on the Brooklyn, something happened there. The Rockets were talking to teams about making trades in the middle of the season, which is different from what they're saying now. So I don't know if it's a combination of just watching the players develop over the course of the season. Is it Jalen's outburst in March? Is it Şengün's kind of season that kind of makes them have second thoughts about being super aggressive? To me, conventional wisdom, especially in the way the CBA said it, we talked about this when the new CBA came out. The NBA is rewarding building from internally now, right? When you try to make these large trades for star players, it really hamstrings your ability to really construct a complete team. Now you could get 5-year extensions to non-designated players with, kind of doing away with some of the rules about types of players you could trade for, being able to pay guys on a different scales and still reward them for guys that you drafted. I think all of that says that we want you to build your talent from in-house. And for the Rockets, they have so many players that it makes sense. Why not just see what happens? You may have a couple of all-stars in this mix. Hopefully we have a top 15 player in this mix. And what you don't want to do is make up, like you said, a panic trade, and a guy ends up being a James Harden where he ends up on another team becoming an all-NBA player because you wanted to, either go for a 48 win team and get a first, second round exit rather than trying to build this thing out as in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with all that. Let's move to offseason free agent targets. And I've got my own 3 names, but my personal philosophy with my list was to make these as realistic as possible. So I'm not going to go with Jokic, Giannis, and Luka, if you know what I mean. You and I haven't discussed this in advance, right, Frank, so it should be fun, and we'll see if there's any overlap. Who is your number 1 target this offseason?
I don't have a top target, but I'm going to do mine. I'm going to start off with tiers of players. I'm going to have a lower tier, kind of a bench, for sure, bench, fringe, like guy that just adds value, a middle tier player that I think can start. And then I'm going to give you not the Jokic level, but a good player that I think if the Rockets wanted to shake things up, they can. I'm going to start lower first. The first player that I would like to, for the Rockets to look at is going to be Jalen Smith from the Indiana Pacers. I think he's only making like $4.5 million this year. He has a player option next year going into this summer, so he has a player option. I feel like he's being underutilized in Indiana. And if you guys know anything about Jalen Smith, he plays a power forward center, super athletic, 40% shooter on, I think about 2.8 attempts from 3. He can play the small ball 5, and you don't lack rebounding or size. And, he is definitely an upgrade from Jeff Green just because he's just a better athlete at this point and he can play longer, and he's young. So I think Jalen Smith adds depth to that center. I said this on our last podcast on the Chop Shop. When you look at the Rockets center rotation right now, including Boban, let's add Boban to it. We have 4 of the same type of centers. They are all different in different ways, but schematically, typically when you look at them, they're drop bigs. You got Şengün, a drop big, even though you can move him around. You have Steven Adams coming off injury, who is a drop big. You also have Jock Landale, who is a drop big. And then you have Boban, who doesn't play, who is a drop big. And for this roster, I know they like playing small ball with Jabari. I would still want us to have on this roster a big man that could actually protect the rim, is able to be a lob threat for our guards, to have a different form of spacing, which is the vertical spacing. I think when Udoka spoke in the press conference about what he likes about, the way his offense wants to look, he used the word being versatile. And I think not having that archetype on the roster does limit some of our versatility. And he's spoken about this in an article interview he did with Kelly Iko a while back about how they had that vertical spacing with Robert Williams over in Boston. And I think so. Jalen Williams, coming off of this season he's probably going to garner a lot of attention in the NBA. But I would be willing to be able to use some money to try to get him somewhere in that, mid-teens contract and try to work out something for him to get him here for maybe a 3+1 or something like that. And he's a great defender. So I really like him.
Yeah, that's a good under the radar. Jalen Smith, not a name that
Jalen Smith. I think it's
I had thought about much, but let me get to mine. There's a big separation between my number 1 target and my number 2 and 3. And it's because I'm so high on this guy. My number 1, he's an unrestricted free agent, Malik Monk.
Whoa, okay.
He'll be in every conversation for 6th man of the year. He's in his prime, age 26, which is a factor in all my targets. He's clutch, which I feel like I need to emphasize a little bit. He's clutch. He's not an elite 3-point shooter, but he's rock solid at 35.5% for his career, and he could get his own shot. It's not just he's a spot-up guy, but he can get his own shot. His assists have gone up every year. This past year, he averaged 5 assists in 26 minutes. He's Van Vliet insurance, which to me is what this team needs more than anything right now, is they need somebody, if Van Vliet goes down, to be able to handle the team a little bit and run some point guard and do some backup point guard. So Van Vliet is not in a flat out panic to get back into the game because the Rockets fall off for the 3 or 4 minutes that he's out. The Kings are up against the cap. So I think you could outbid them on this. And I wouldn't be afraid to give him something in the low 20s. We know the Rockets can get out of 23 million with Landale, Tate, and Jeff Green. And I also think, Frank, that his contract, if you gave him a low 20s contract, even up into the mid 20s with the new cap, and it's something that if you needed to get out of it because the young guys started to take off and you're starting to have to pay those, I don't think it's going to be a bad contract. Because like I said, he's still in his prime. He's still a young guy. He's going to age okay. And that guy, I think, you see the improvement year by year.
That is a name. I have actually thought about that, but I would disagree with you on who's insurance. I see him as Jalen Green insurance.
Yeah, that too. I mean, I should have said that. I thought of that too, because if you don't like Jalen after a year and you sign him for that kind of contract, he's somebody that can play guard for you. And if Van Vliet leaves, you've got him, Amen Thompson, if he's still not ready to play on ball, you can have him in the backcourt. And I think that would be two guys that would complement each other well in Malik Monk and Amen Thompson in the backcourt.
I actually like that. Even if Jalen, let's say Jalen does live up, you also have a scoring punch off the bench. As you said, he's a guy that, and this is the role he's playing currently in Sacramento. Him and Jalen do have very similar games, and that gives you that kind of a combo of where you have a dynamic scorer, which, in my opinion, we do lack players on our team that can create their own shot. You guys saw kind of towards the end of the season when the defenses got really, really good, and we couldn't get into transition in the half court setting. If Jalen was getting trapped, you don't have a lot of other guys you can kick the ball to. You know, Fred is good on the catch and shoots, but you don't expect Fred to be able to break down a defense. Malik can do that. I actually do like him. And yeah, 26 years old. I didn't even know he was that young. He's used to playing off of a post player in Sabonis. So you know the integration with the Şengün offense, him coming off of dribble handoffs, flying down off of screens, attacking, finishing. And he's a guy that is, to me, if making a case for you, addresses two issues. He is a movement shooter, which I think is very important. A guy that comes off the screen and can get right into a shot, and he's also a good pick and roll ball handler. That's a good one. I'm gonna go up a tier on mine. So Jalen Smith was my first one. I'm gonna go up a tier, and a similar player to Malik Monk, but more of a role player version. I'm gonna go with Kentavious Caldwell Pope. KCP to me is a player that he is one of my favorite 3-and-D guards in the NBA. I think he is a consummate professional. This is a guy that you know exactly what you're getting every single year. He is so smart, super high IQ, makes the right plays, a good defender, a great defender, great shooter, great movement shooter, can make all this. I mean, he's probably one of the most valuable players in the league. That's a role player. If Denver is stupid enough to let him walk in free agency, because he does have a player option for $15 million next year, I feel like he's worth way more than that. I would gladly give him Dillon Brooks money. So I'm going to go with KCP as my next guy. If he does dabble into free agency and rejects his $15 million player option next year, the Rockets, in my opinion, should be super aggressive in trying to land him here in Houston, because he's a two-time champion. Let me throw that in there as well. Just more of the same of what we added with Fred, guys that are winners and smart players.
You nailed it, and I did not have him in my 3, but I had made a note at the end that he's somebody I wanted. The only reason I didn't have him in my 3 is I just feel like he's going to be a little bit harder, and there's going to be more moving pieces, because I feel like if you sign him, you got to figure out somewhere to dump Dillon Brooks money, because I think they're very repetitive. And I think he's just a huge upgrade, better defender, better shooter, higher IQ than Dillon Brooks. Like you said, the championship, all the things that you said, I love him. And if they could figure out a way to dump Dillon, I think that would be the best thing, to just switch him out with Dillon Brooks. And yeah, I love KCP. And boy, if Denver can't figure out a way to do it, yeah, that's somebody you definitely want. My number 2 target is an unrestricted free agent, Tyus Jones. I mean, this is a name we've talked about in the past, and to me, this is a no-brainer. I'm concerned about the depth again behind Van Vliet. He's as solid as they come, 39% from 3 over his last 3 years, 27 years old, again, in his prime, spent a ton of time in a winning situation in Memphis. No idea what kind of situation he's going to look for, but he's definitely worth a mid-level contract. If it gets anything beyond that, if somebody's like, hey, we're going to make you the starter that Rockets can't compete with. If San Antonio comes in and says, hey, we're going to make you a starter and you could play with Wemby, we can't compete. But if there's a chance, I would love to get him on something like a mid-level.
That's a great one. A great one. I think a lot of Rockets fans have been after Tyus Jones for the past few years. One of the needs we have is a secondary, like you said, the Fred VanVleet insurance. I think we also need just a backup point guard. As much as I love Amen, I don't think he's at the level yet where you can. And guys, when I talk about people that watch my channel know Amen Thompson is, to me, is the top prospect the Rockets have overall, because he has the IQ and the physical abilities that are top, right? Because I love Şengün. People accuse me of being a Şengün stan. Şengün is not, for his position, he's not a physically dominant player. Amen Thompson is. And Amen Thompson, to me, is just as smart on both ends of the court as Şengün is. So that's why I have him ranked so high. He is not at the level where, if the Rockets do mean to make the playoffs next year, and I assume we will, that you can trust the man to run your sets in a playoff setting. And you guys go watch the games now. What teams do to non-shooting guards that are going to be on ball. It's going to be nasty. So I think his development long-term is for him to get there. I love how they used him this year as a screener, a guy that can cut from the corners, a guy that's good on offense and rebounds, crashing the glass, being able to do multiple things on the court. But as far as just a guy that I can just go to bed at night saying that I have a backup one, and if Fred goes down, he can run the show, I don't think you would have to get creative to use it. So that's why I think even with the Amen Thompson, you still need a true point guard to back up Fred, because you need a guy that could organize, preferably shoot, because the better the shooter is at that point guard, you can play him in at the 3 or the 2, and he can still facilitate as a ball handler. So, yeah, I do love that, and I think that should be a target for the Rockets. I kind of love how, to me, a team as young as we are, you need to be deep. And people always say, well, where are you going to find the minutes? You're going to find minutes because guys are going to get hurt, because certain combinations and matchups are going to dictate that certain guys play more. So it's not this like rigid, every player gets the same minutes every game. It's going to be kind of a give and take. There might be games where you have a Tyus Jones on the roster and he has to play 30 minutes because of whatever reasons, because maybe it's a bad matchup for Cam or or a man, or somebody is dinged up. So don't look at it as we have 9 guys and they just have to plug in. Some guys won't play every night. Some guys will only play 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Some matchups call for it. Some guys get hurt. You want to go at least 11 to 12 deep of real NBA talent to compete in the West, because these teams are coming. There are a lot of teams that aren't in the playoffs with us that, to me, are going to be playoff teams next year. So that's a great pick.
Was he on your list, or did you have another guy? Who's your?
I have another guy, and this is my obviously I can't leave without having something the chat and the comments are going to argue about. This is my upper echelon. It's not quite the Zion and Luka level, but I'm going to go with Paul George. Paul George is a player that I have been infatuated with for some time. I really value his skill set. He's a very unique player. He's a small forward, 6'9", can create, he can score, he can defend. In isolation and on the team. He is making currently right now, he has a $48 million player option for next year. And this one will take some finessing for the Rockets to be able to get a player like that. But to me, the reason I like Paul George, because the position that he's going to be taking is Dillon Brooks, right? And you can get him on such a contract, to me, that is front-loaded enough that it involves you parting ways with Van Vliet after next season. It involves you moving off of Dillon Brooks and a bunch of those Jeff Green, the reason that Stone, which I give him credit for, structured the contracts of Jeff Green, Londale, all the guys that we got that when we were trying to get Brook Lopez that failed, all of those guys are just inflated, almost player laundering. We just gave Jock Landale, how much is Jock making? $9 million? Let me see.
I think
Jeff Green makes 9.6.
Yeah, it's about 8.
Londale is making 8. And what NBA is Londale getting 8? So this is player laundering that the Rockets did.
So to get him, you would basically have to do a sign and trade with the Clippers, and they would get Dillon Brooks, and either they could keep him or they could flip him, or they could find another team, reroute him or something.
With picks. Yeah. This would cost picks. This would cost us some picks. But, Paul George, he is in, lower 30s. I think you think about a team with Jalen Green, with Fred VanVleet, Paul George, Jabari Smith, and Alperen Sengun. Talk about the defense. We were already a top 10 defense.
Well, he was going to opt out. So why are picks necessary?
Oh, okay. Yeah. You're right. If they do a sign and trade, I thought they would sign him there. Yeah. If they do a sign and trade, it'll be something. And you just have to look at the Clipper situation. As we're talking right now, they're winning right now. But if they go out in the first round, which I'm kind of hoping for, then you kind of start wondering about the extent of how long they're going to. Kawhi is hurt. James Harden is a free agent. Russell Westbrook's a free agent. Ty Lue already rumored that he wants to be out of that situation. So if the Rockets do want to make that big splash, then I'm sure Tillman would love. Paul George is at the tier of player that you don't really, he doesn't get in the way of any of the young guys, maybe except the Tari Eason and possibly Cam. But to me, they're so young that who cares, right? You can still just play them along and just see how it goes. Maybe you get them for 3 years and with a team option on the 4th. That gives you, to me, a leg up in the West, where you need those type of players to compete. So that is my controversial guy. Is going to be PG.
Yeah, he's kind of similar to, I love him, but he's just very similar to some of the other guys' skill sets that you got that you're really hoping are going to do some stuff. I went back and forth on my third target, and I thought seriously about bringing back Isaiah Hartenstein. Who I'm not discounting that period, but he's become just such an elite defensive player, and he's unrestricted and in the heart of his prime. The problem is you need another team to take Steven Adams' contract off your hands without bringing any money back. So if the Knicks just feel like they're going to lose him or they can't pay him enough money, and you can do a sign and trade with Steven Adams, but somehow you got to work that out. He's a younger, healthier Steven Adams is the way I look at him. Yeah. Same way that we're talking about KCP as a better version of Dillon Brooks, but lots of moving parts. So instead I simplified things. Buddy Hield's going to get a lot of run as a 3-point marksman in free agency, but Doug McDermott will be cheaper. Yep. And I think he's going to be the better value. McDermott, excellent 41% career 3-point mark. Spent a couple of years under Pop, so Udoka and McDermott will speak the same language. There's your quintessential movement shooter, Frank. I got him for you.
That would be actually, Dougie McBuckets. I would not be mad at that. And I think he is the tier of that's who the level of player I expect the Rockets probably end up getting. And to me, that's when I say making improvements on the peripherals, that's what I mean, right? Replacing a guy like Boban or with a Doug McDermott, a vet minimum guy that actually brings you a real skill set that may win you one game or two in a season. There might be a game where Doug gets hot and hits 7 threes, right? And that's the difference between you being a 8 seed or playing a play. So to me, those are the things. I love the Jonathans of the world and the all these guys that we have down on the end. But to me, the Jeff Green, a Holiday, those type of players should be the Bobans, where they play in blowouts and things like that. Jeff Green did not come down here to be a 25-minute per game backup 5. He is on the tail end of his career. He's here to be a mentor and a vet. He should not have seen as many minutes as he did, but he ended up doing it, and he played serviceably. But once again, Robert, you think about the West this year, right? Teams that, to me, are going to make a flip. Memphis, I think Memphis is going to have something to say about those play-in spots coming next year. I think San Antonio, as bad as they are this year, Wemby's really good, guys. If they make the right moves this offseason, they could be in the play-in as early as next year, in my opinion. And those are two teams I think that we're going to be competing for those spots as well. Then you got the usual cast, Dallas, New Orleans coming back. I think if the Golden State finds somehow some way to conglomerate a team around Steph Curry, they're going to be in the discussions. As long as LeBron James breathes, he's going to be in the discussions. Minnesota's still there. I mean, the West is loaded. Standing pat is not an option for the Rockets. Even with internal development, guess what? Other teams get better too. OKC's going to get better. We're not the only ones that are training, guys. Everybody trains. Everybody tries to improve their roster. So in this NBA, you just have to always keep moving and finding ways to get an edge up on the competition. And I think that the Rockets need to do so by finding guys on the edges like the Dougie McBuckets of the world.
Yeah, so if you look at the three that I chose, I went with Monk, McDermott, and Tyus Jones. I don't really feel like it's realistic money-wise to bring all three of those guys in, but I definitely know you could get two of those guys. I mean, Malik Monk would be, if they only got Malik Monk, I would be ecstatic of those three guys. But, I would hope Malik Monk and maybe one of those other two guys would be, if not, McDermott and Tyus Jones, there's nothing more realistic than that. I mean, those guys are not going to stay in the same situation that they are right now. So, I really feel like that's got a shot. I mean, if you could get a KCP, though, if you can upgrade on Dylan Brooks to KCP, if you can upgrade and get a Hartenstein over Steven Adams, I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, those are some major upgrades. There are guys out there this offseason without getting a superstar that they're big deals. I mean, these are big time guys that could really help and that really fit what the Rockets are trying to do.
Definitely true. And for the guys that I picked with Jalen Smith, KCP, and Paul George, you can't bring out three. Obviously, I think you could. To me, the ideal would be the two bottom guys, the Jalen Smith and a guy like KCP. Those are realistic. It's just a matter of the market and whether they want to actually come to Houston. I think if those guys said, "I'm going to go play in Houston with Coach Udoka," I think they can, because you look at the team options the Rockets have right now on the roster. You have Jeff Green, a $9.6 million team option. Jock Landale, that's $8 million, so that's $18 million right there. You also have Jayshawn Tate at $7 million. That's $26 million right there. That should be enough to sign those two guys. And you're not even talking about Steven Adams's contract at that $12.6 million, which is great for to make trades if you needed to. It's realistic. They can do it. The Paul George one, I think is a little bit more far-fetched. Honestly, for me, a player of his caliber, I think possibly next offseason, not this one coming up, would be when the Rockets look to, if we made the play-in or the playoffs this year, and let's say we're a first-round exit coming up, then you go get the Paul George, because that may be the guy to push you to the second or the conference finals. And at that point, when you can appear in the first round multiple years in a row, all you need, and this is Daryl Morey's philosophy, you just need the opportunities, because if you put yourself in position to make the playoffs, all it takes is one run, and you might find yourself in the conference finals or the finals. So it's about having those opportunities, and the best way to do that is having the right talent. So I'm with you. I think making those moves on the edges, letting the young guys grow, and seeing what we do this year is the best way to go. And I'm going to see what the Rockets do, because they have a lot of big decisions to make. Do you draft? Do you not draft? It's going to be an interesting summer.
Yeah, and that's another piece that you could be adding to the puzzle, is just having another young guy off the bench, and he might not, just like Cam Whitmore, he might not matter the first 20 or 30 games you have him in the G League, but maybe he can give you something, later in the season. And also, we talk about movement shooters. There are a couple of guys in the draft. There's a guy that's projected to be about where the Rockets would pick if everything goes according to Hoyle, and they're picking with that Brooklyn pick at number 9. That, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about what one of your contributors to Rockets Chop Shot, Cooper Klein. We're going to go over some of the draft guys, and I want to bring that guy's name into the mix. I'm going to do that in the next few weeks. But yeah, there's definitely some options without losing anything, adding without losing certain guys, and the only real guys anybody's talking about losing in some of these scenarios are the Landales and the Jeff Greens and Jayshawn Tate. And,
Dylan Brooks, let's throw that out there. And I'm going to say all the guys I brought in, you lose none of your core 6. It does alter Fred's contract at some point, because I feel like that team option for Fred is reserved for a star player. And you could either pivot it towards a star player, or you could use it to kind of sign some of your guys that you have in-house if they did warrant getting the fun max or whatever. But you could still give 2 max contracts. Let's say, assuming Jalen and Şengün have great breakout years, you could still give them the rookie scale maxes and still bring in a third, like a real regular max player to your roster, because you have so many rookies that are contributors right now. So it depends on what the Rockets want to do. I think that the fact that, once again, the CBA incentivizes developing from within. The question, one thing, I know you heard this, Robert, when they asked Rafael Stone, do you think you keep all 6? Without a flinching or nothing. This is the first time I've heard him answer something without stuttering. He said, yes, we can. And I believe that they can, because one, not everybody's going to be a superstar because they won't have the opportunity to become superstars. And number 2 is that guys are going to fill their roles, and you can give them a 5th year and the market can't.
Just a couple of quick questions. You had Fred VanVleet as your Rockets' most valuable player. That's who I had. I assume that was
no. I have Şengün. No. Şengün is my most valuable player.
Yeah. No, we disagree.
No, I understand the argument for Fred. I think Fred's value, it depends on how you define value. When it comes to holistically on the team, yes, I think Fred is value, like on the court, as an organizer, as the team captain, the defense, his production, yes. But when it comes to X and O's, I think Şengün is for this season was the Rockets' universe for most of the year.
Yeah, my argument was he helped unlock Şengün, what he did on both sides of the floor, what he did off the court, what he did as a leader.
Yeah,
the fact that he played more games, the fact that he was more consistent on a night-to-night basis. I just all of those factors that I played.
Yeah, if we were going by that definition, then yes, Fred is the most valuable player on the Rockets because he impacted more than Şengün's play. He also impacted Jalen. He transcended multiple players and the culture of the team. That's a different, to me, that's a different thing. When I think of value and as a players on basketball, I'm thinking of the construct of like the X and O's on the offense and defense. And I think for a majority of the season till he got hurt, Şengün was the fulcrum for a lot of things that the Rockets did. And to me, he unlocked Fred and allowed him to have one of his better years. A lot of those assists that Fred VanVleet gets love for, I think a huge majority of them are to Alperen Şengün. So I think they helped each other out a lot this year. But I'm not arguing with anybody that puts that on Fred because I think he is that important to the Rockets.
The second thing I wanted to ask you is, are you going to hold a ball handling or dribbling camp for the Rockets play? Because if there's one thing that this team needs work on so bad, is these guys do not know how to dribble the ball very well. And it's not just Amen, although he's number one on the list for me there.
Yes.
Cam Whitmore needs some work on it to a degree. Jalen Green needs some work on it to a degree. We all know Tari had some issues at times when he has played. I mean, this is a team full of dribbling issues.
Yeah, it's you forgot Jabari. A lot of these guys they were not drafted to be primary ball handlers. I think Udoka's offense does force you to have that skill set because you have to make decisions.
But if you're going to be at the high ceiling that you can reach.
Yeah, obviously. Well, Amen is no excuse. Like, I don't understand why Amen doesn't have better handles. It's crazy. Like, you've been groomed to be a point guard. Like, what are we doing here? So there's no excuse for Amen Thompson. He has to. To me, his handles in the short term are going to be more important than his shooting. Because if he cannot handle the ball, then it does really limit his ceiling as a player. As much as Ben Simmons got a lot of flack, Ben Simmons could handle it. I mean, in the open court, he looked like Magic Johnson in some plays because he just had such control of his ball handling and the passing. And for a non-shooting primary ball handler, if you're not going to be able to shoot, you got to be elite as a Rondo. You think of Jason Kidd, you think of all these guys. These are elite ball handlers, and you cannot have that as a whole. If you can't shoot, then it really does limit you. For the rest of the guys, yeah, I think Jalen's made big strides in that in his ability to dribble. I think a lot of his stuff is strength. I think Jabari and Tari, they definitely need to at least be able to attack closeouts competently and dribble to the basket without picking up their dribble.
I did mention Jabari because I've already seen him improve light years from just one.
Yeah, but that's coming from the basement, brother. I mean, you coming from the basement to the first floor, then yeah, it looks good. But we're trying to get them to the upper rooms of ball handling for their positions at least. I think Jabari has a long way to go on that if he wants to reach the ceiling. But yeah, I think shooting and ball handling is going to be fundamental for our team.
Well, the real ceiling with Jabari, though, to me, I mean, the only thing this guy turns into something really special is the shot. And I am not buying that he's going to be anywhere close to the three-point shooter, an elite three-point shooter than we thought just by watching him on the free throw line. I just don't buy it. And everybody talks about the fact that what kind of shots he's getting. What he gets are open shots, tons of them. When he's shooting, he's open. When he's shooting, nobody is blocking the shot because nobody can. It's like every shot that he takes, he doesn't have to worry about that because he's got that great high release and his three-point shooting is average, but it's because nobody actually guards him most of the time. I mean, he's wide open. They don't treat him like he's a real threat.
I think for Jabari, his greatness will be a combination of being good at a lot of little things. I think he needs to be a good enough shooter from the 3-point and mid-range. He needs to be a good rebounder. He needs to be a good defender, at least a decent like one-pass playmaker. And I think in aggregate, when you combine all those things with his length and hopefully the IQ continues to progress upward, then all in combination, he becomes a really valuable player to have on your team. I don't see him having this crazy like all NBA superstar upside, but I think he can be a really, really good player, almost like the KCP, but as a forward version. A guy that's going to guard, make all the right plays, all the things you want to say about these really good players in the NBA. So I think he's shown strides towards doing that this season. Coming from where he came from last season, I think the steps he's taken this year as a shooter compared to last year are huge. I think the ball handling has improved, like you said. I think the defense has improved a lot compared to last year. The rebounding took a leap this year, kind of tailed off towards the end of the season. I think that as he grows, and he's not even fully developed yet, as he develops, he's still one of the younger players in the league. You will see the value, and just because I think for the fan base, every one of these players, they won't all be all-stars, and that is perfectly fine. That's the only way you keep them. And Jabari won't have the opportunity that Şengün and Jalen had because that's not his game. So even if he wanted to be an all-star, he wouldn't be because he wouldn't even have the shots or the ability to handle the ball to even get to that level. So he needs to be elite at the little things, and I think that's where he's trending towards, and we hope he keeps going.
You got the Nuggets and the Celtics in the final?
Nuggets, the Celtics. Yeah, I mean, that's the easy pick. If I had an upset pick in each conference, if Kawhi was healthy, I would have said the Clippers were upset to make it to the finals. And in the East, I think I was leaning towards Philly if Embiid was fully healthy and they had their full team. This year, it seems like it's going to end up being Celtics Nuggets, but you never know. Injuries, random things could happen. The series have not started yet. Once all these teams have adjusted to each other, you will know by game 3 and 4 who's going to get swept. Is this going 7? And what the real things are. So I don't put too much stock into game ones.
Yeah, the Celtics should go 60. They should go 12-0 in the East, and they should, be in their bathing suit at the pool waiting for whoever comes out of the West and the bloodbath. And maybe Denver gets flies through. I don't see anybody else flying through the West, but maybe they fly through like the Celtics do, and maybe they don't have the advantage of the rest like the Celtics might potentially have. But it's hard for me to imagine those two teams not there. The Mavericks are the one, to me, scary team. Yeah, because they really got it rolling right now. Latest on Rockets Chop Shop.
Yeah, we just had a new episode of Rockets Talk drop, I think, yesterday. We'll just try to fill in the offseason with different things that happens during the offseason. Draft, obviously, would be coming up, and then free agency, and then we'll go anything that comes out in the news from there, we'll be talking about it.
Remind everybody out there, we want to hear from you. Who's your Rockets free agent or offseason target? Let us know what you think. Also, don't forget, I've got playlist for Houston sports history on my channel, so you can go watch old interviews with Calvin Murphy and Rodney McRae and Robert Reed and Moochie Norris. There's all sorts of fun interviews about Clutch City and all that sort of stuff, so go check that out. But thanks a lot, Frank. Always good to talk to you, and looking forward to these playoffs, man. I can't wait.
Yes, sir.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.